guys, Ash here coming at you today in Raid Shadow Legends. Welcome to the video, guys. Happy to have you here. Hopefully finds you all doing well today. Hydra Clan Boss, it's been in the game for a while now. Today, a pretty complete and thorough guide based on everything that I have personally learned. I'm going to share a ton of champions with you guys today as well, talking about kind of the key roles on a well-balanced Hydra Clan Boss team, what I'm looking for, maybe some sleeper picks as well. So if I miss your favorite champion, certainly let me know in the comments below who you rely on and why you love them so much. Let's start with just the overall state of Hydra Clan Boss in the game right now. I actually, believe it or not, guys, I really love Hydra Clan Boss.
I never knew you were this weird.
Really?
Absolutely mental.
In a nice way?
Yeah.
But
This is a new development with me. I think it was after they adjusted it to be a little bit easier. That being said, we're grading on a curve here because it is the most difficult area in the game. It's super challenging, right? Because you don't have to have just one team. You need 3 teams. And who has enough champions for all these key roles we're going to talk about to actually, efficiently get these rewards that are lackluster? And I think that's the biggest issue right now with Hydra Clan Boss. Sure, the 3-team thing and not using the same champions really does suck for a lot of players out there. But with all that said, man, give us, at the very least, the hardest, most difficult area in the game. Granted, Mithril Lifebane is amazing, and I want you all to get her, right? Which is why we're doing this video. But the hardest area in the game, dude, give me some sacred shards, some legendary skill tomes, some epic skill, everything that you get from regular clan boss, which is the old clan boss, the easier clan boss. But we get worse rewards, we get some clan points. Stone Skin's amazing, don't get me wrong, but it's just one-dimensional. It's an arena set. And then you get some fragments for Mithril Lifebane. We need a little bit more, right? Why not add some of those rewards? Let me know how you feel about the rewards overall in Hydra Clan Boss. But for me, that would be a big first step in making it a more enjoyable experience. All that being said, I've been having a lot of fun just trying to optimize my 3 teams. I'll show you 2 of my teams in today's video. I'm not even gonna do, I can't do a run because I've already used the teams. But more importantly, I want to talk about the roles and all of these, these champions that you guys can use as well. So I wanted to start by talking first, though, about the Head of Mischief, right? So Head of Decay can be provoked, which is great. Okay, that's going to stop that poison cloud. So we're going to talk about all the best provokers for Hydra Clan Boss. Head of Mischief is super annoying, right? Head of Mischief and Head of Torment, I would say, are the heads that really give people trouble out of all the Hydra Clan Boss heads. I feel like, a lot of players just want to go in there. They want to go on auto. They don't want to have to think about memorizing every single ability and skill of every single head. But most importantly, you do need to have a response for the Torment and Mischief, right? So Torment is going to be fear and true fear on all of your enemies or your allies, your champions, right? So having a champion like Inquisitor Shamil is going to be paramount to a lot of Hydra Clan Boss teams to mitigate the Head of Torment. Head of Suffering is even more annoying. He has, first of all, a 75% chance, Head of Mischief, excuse me, has a 75% chance of redirecting any enemy attack onto another random head. Will not occur if the head is under a Hex debuff. That's why champions like Mithril Lifebane is so good at combating the Head of Mischief. At least you can target the dude, right? Other than that, you're basically leaning heavily on the AoE champions on your team. But he attacks the enemy with the most buffs, steals all the buffs, and steals 50% of the target's turn meter, and then applies a buff spread, taking all those buffs from the head and placing them on all the heads. This dude is the reason that a lot of teams wipe in Clan Boss. This dude is the reason why champions such as, Valkyrie or Helicath, champions with really good buffs, right? Counterattack and block debuffs and really good shields and block damage. This is why those champions can be a liability against a Hydra Clan Boss, because Head of Mischief will steal them and then, again, spread them to all the other heads, which you do not want. So how to combat this? You can develop on your team a Hydra Clan Boss tank for the Head of Mischief, right? And what you're gonna do is basically architect one champion on your team that will always be receiving the most buffs, right? So you can have a self buffer. You can even have a champion like Vergis, have him place all his buffs on a champion with very high resistance, and that champion, whoever it is, however you wanna build the team, there's so many different ways to do it, whoever has the most buffs on your team is going to be able to build them with very, very high resistance, and they'll just be resisting that A1 ability. For Hydra on the last settings here, so on Nightmare settings, we're aiming for around 400, 450 resistance, and then it scales down from there. I want to say it's around 390 for Brutal, around 350, and around 300 on normal resistance, but you guys can go ahead and double check those as well. I'll have, by the way, Hades' website linked for you guys for an additional resource on all the Hydra heads and how to best handle them. So now we talked about some of the more challenging heads to deal with. Now let's get into, first of all, my teams, and then we'll talk a little bit. Actually, let's talk about key roles first. So actually, let's look at my... Oh my God! I'm wavering here. Let's look at my teams first. So these are my 2 favorite teams, guys. Let's start with this one here. 82 million damage, almost 83 million. A lot of damage here. Granted, good gear, good champions. Not here to sit here and tell you anything other than that, right? It's all about the roles, though, and the utility that you can get out of these champions. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of kind of trash champions, which some people will say, that champion sucks, that actually can be utilized in Hydra Clan Boss. You just need to be thoughtful about this.
I'm rich.
You need to know your account, your teams, your strengths, and your weaknesses.
Maybe put some money in your pocket.
And the biggest thing I look out for before we get into any of these champions, the biggest thing I look for on any champion is if we identify, let's see, 8 roles, 8 buffs slash debuffs slash things that we can do in the battle that we really want to have. If I can find a champion that does 2 or even 3 of those things in one champion, that is a champion I'm definitely investing in. So on a team like this, we have Mother Cybele, who I absolutely love. We'll talk more about these champions. She's an AoE, she decreased speed, and she's a support champion as well. Speed, lead as well. Speed is so important. Increased speed buff, speed leads in Hydra Clan Boss. Speed is king. Same thing goes with decreased speed on the opposite side. So having an AoE decreased speed, we'll talk about a bunch of those champions in a moment. Contra the Cyclone is one of the best provokers out there in the game because of her passive. We'll talk more about that later in the video. She's also a great debuffer. She has block buffs, decreased attack, decreased defense, great kit, very, very good champion, especially in reflex as I have her built here. Mashal is fantastic with an AoE on his A1 if everybody's under leech, which he's placing on his A2, another increased speed champion. We have Ugo with block buffs and decreased defense and a mini cleanse and a heal. That's 4 roles, and maybe even a reviver if you count it, right? In one champion. That's why Ugo is one of the best Hydra Clan Boss champions in the game. Rio Bone Spear is a reviver.
What? Since when?
Not a reviver, excuse me, a healer and a cleanser and a very, very good support champion with a lot of debuffs on her A2. And then Geomancer is one of the best damage dealers in the game because of his A3 ability in that synergy with damage mitigation off of the passive. So that's team number 1. We have an AoE A1. We have another AoE A1. Got a bunch of AoEs coming out of Contra's A2. We have an AoE A1 as well on Mashal. So AoE A1, something I definitely look for on all of my teams. Now, on my other team, on Brutal difficulty, we have Duchess. So a reviver, another really good support champion. She also has damage mitigation on her passive. Guys, if you're lucky enough to have a champion like Duchess, a champion like Norak, those passives are like a built-in, sometimes strengthened buff all the time on your team. Do not underestimate and underrate those passives. Damage mitigation. Reduce the damage all allies receive by X. That is so powerful in this game, especially in longer battles against the Hydra Clan Boss. We have Cupidus and Venus, dynamic duo debuffer, and AoE on the A1 with Cupidus, counterattacking all the time. We have Norak as a cleanser support champion, and block buffs with a debuff spread on her A2 is super handy. Increased defense, increased speed, she has it all. Railguard, one of the best DPS, sheer damage dealers in the game. And then Lydia, obviously, for everything she brings in her A2. This team, now that I have to critique it myself here, I brought Lydia but I don't think I need Lydia in this spot, right? I think I could probably sub her out for somebody else. She's only really bringing, if you look at the rest of the team, the only thing she's bringing to the table that we don't have is strengthen on her A2. Increased speed, decreased defense, and weaken we have covered with Venus and with Norak. So I think she could probably be subbed out for more damage. Let's talk about that in a little bit as well. But let's talk about some champions here, guys, and some key roles on these teams, right? What roles are these champions playing here, more so than those specific champions? So let's start out with block buffs. Personally, block buffs is my absolute favorite thing in the game, right? For Hydra Clan Boss, it is the most quintessential debuff. It's the first thing that I'm thinking about for any Hydra Clan Boss team. And actually, one last thing, I also want to point out something on Masteries, guys. So on Masteries, I'm just going to go to Fushan. Don't pay attention to Fushan or what I have for Masteries here. I just want to point out on these longer battles, which obviously Hydra Clan Boss is a super long battle compared to most in this game. Really getting lasting gifts on every champion that has buffs, that brings buffs to the table, and getting Master Hexer on any champion that brings debuffs to the table is going to be so important, guys. And by the same token, rapid response, 30% chance to increase the turn meter by 10% when a buff cast by this champion, or the inverse, Swarm Switer.
Do I know you?
Excuse me, the inverse, Arcane Celerity, 30% chance increasing turn meter by 10% when a debuff cast by this champion. Those are going to be really important as well. And I say that because over these long fights, abilities like this, Arcane Celerity, Rapid Response, Lasting Gifts, and Master Hexer could be difference makers, right? Extending the duration of buffs and debuffs, and then helping with turn meter fill on those buffers and debuffers on your squad over those long battles really does help out. Another one that I will point out, guys, there's a lot of really cool masteries that you guys can pick up. Not Selfless Defender, although that's good in the arena, but you guys can pick up Bulwark, right? Decrease the damage all allies receive by 5%. This champion, put it on a tanky champion, will receive that damage instead. Sometimes on your support champions, you're better off going with Bulwark versus War Master, right? In these longer battles, that will help you. That damage mitigation will help you out more and keep your team alive longer at the end of the day. All right, let's go into these champions here, guys. You know what? I'm going to show you, I think I have most of the champions we're going to talk about here, so I'm just going to show you the ones that I have and the ones that I use. Quick disclaimer here is that the artifacts are pretty good on most of these champions, but some of them I don't actually use presently right now, so it just might be random gear, so don't judge me too hard if we're rocking like a 50% crit rate, and I'll point that out for you guys as I go through. Let's start with Umbral, right? I mean, there's so many good options here for block buffs in the game. That's the good news. The bad news is you're going to need 3 of them, right? That's the bummer here. So Umbral Enchantress is fantastic because of the A2, right? Immolate is an AoE attack, has a 100% chance of placing block buffs for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. That's great. We want to shut off our A3 ability because we don't want to lock ourselves out for 5 turns, right? We don't want, even though a 2-turn provoke is great for provoking, we don't want that. We want the Immolate to be available every 3 turns so we have block buffs up all the time on the Hydra heads. Block buffs is going to be your #1 friend, as I mentioned. I hope I'm not belaboring the point too much for Hydra Clan Boss. Another champion that is really, I feel, underrated in terms of a good, you know, I'm going to stop trying to get through my champion collection every here. Forget that. Let me just get him in the index here. Another one who I feel like is underrated, guys, is none other than Mortu Macabre. So Mortu Macabre is great because he has a speed in all battles lead. So 24% speed in all battles. That's the best in the game, tied for like 5 other champions. But that's the reason I run Mother Cybele in the lead on my main team, right? Mortu Macabre, same thing. You can run him in the lead, and then he's going to have an AoE block buffs as well. So AoE block buffs on a 2-time hitter. It is on a 4-turn cooldown, but if you have a champion like Inquisitor Shamil, he can speed boost onto Mortu Macabre since he's in the lead position, and he's going to be taking in all of those true fears to be cleansed and getting that turn meter boost. Ergo, more block buffs up more often. So really good option for you guys. Not my favorite because of the 4-turn, but really solid because of that speed aura. That speed aura is fantastic. Definitely take advantage of that. Next one is going to be a champion that all of you guys have, I think, and it's none other than, where are you? Deliana, right in front of my face. So Deliana has an AoE with Leech on the A1. That's great for Hydra Clan Boss. She also has decreased resistance with a buff spread, and then she has a block buffs. Again, this is on a 4-turn cooldown, so not my favorite out there, but she's another option for you guys. Next up is going to be really one of my favorites, and you guys who watch the channel regularly know this. It's Bishop Pintroy. He has increased accuracy. Increased accuracy is right below increased speed as a really great buff to have in Hydra Clan Boss. But he also has block buffs on this same ability, and this is on a 3-turn cooldown. He also brings a shield to the table, increased defense to the table, a heal to the table as well. He's doing a lot. I really love this dude as a support and a block buffs option. Next up is going to be, we just mentioned him earlier, guys, but Norak. Norak has this passive, like I talked about, 15% or 25% damage mitigation. That's amazing. And then he has an AoE block buffs on a 3-turn cooldown. He was on one of my 2 teams that I highlighted earlier. A great champion for Hydra Clan Boss. A lot of people sleep on this dude.
And this is a champion that I've said I regret before, and every time there's comments of people saying, no, I love him, he's actually great. And this champion is actually Norak.
What? I feel pretty passionately that he is a really, really good choice for you guys. Next up is going to be, we mentioned her, Ugo, the queen of Hydra Clan Boss. She has block buffs, decreased defense on the same ability on a 3-turn cooldown. On the A2, on the A1, a leech. On the A3, we have remove heal reduction, remove another random debuff, and then heals by 20% of this champion's max HP. Ugo is amazing. Next up, we have, I told you there's going to be a lot of champions in this video, Mossbeard. I actually really like Gerptuck as well. He has this nice 2-turn cleanse and heal on the A2, so it can help out in a pinch between your other support champions. And then on the A3, we have a poison on all your allies to help with their damage off of his passive. But most importantly, we have block buffs as it pertains to Hydra Clan Boss on a 3-turn cooldown for 2 turns again. So I really like Gerptuck as well. The next one is just one of the better overall champions for Hydra Clan Boss, and it's Lady Kimmy if you're lucky enough to have her. She's bringing decreased accuracy, decreased speed, increased accuracy, increased speed, and block buffs. Granted, it is on a 4-turn cooldown there, and it is qualified 100% chance of placing a block buff for 2 turns on enemies who have buffs removed. So they have to have buffs removed in order to get that block buffs. But for that reason, she's not the most dependable block buffs champion in the game. However, she's amazing for every other reason in her kit. She's great to have as almost a secondary option. Me, I like to kind of go overkill. I like to have 2 options. Either a buff stripper and a block buffs champion, or 2 block buffs champion on my team, because when all those Hydra heads get a bunch of buffs, half the time it's game over. It feels that way, right? All right, next up, we can't forget about 2 more champions. There's a lot of them on the block buffs category, but I think it's important that we go through all these champions. Contra the Cyclone, I already talked about her. In Reflex, I freaking love this champion, guys. I'm gonna go over her block buffs ability, her A2, and I'm also gonna go over why she's one of the better Provokers right now, so we don't have to talk about her at the end of the video when we talk about the Provokers. In Reflex gear especially, we have a 40% chance of reducing the cooldown of this ability. She only has 1 active skill other than her A1, right? So it's going to go right here. And then she has 3 of these debuffs. Every single time she uses this ability, 75% chance of landing. She has block buffs, decrease speed, attack, weaken, and decrease accuracy, heal reduction, all on this ability. And essentially what's going to happen, especially in Reflex gear, is she's just going to keep going and going and going and going, landing so many debuffs, and there's going to be more than 5 debuffs on all the heads almost all the time, unless they just cleanse themselves, right, on Hydra Clan Boss. Thus, 75% chance of placing a Provoke for 1 turn on all enemies under 5 or more debuffs at the start of this champion's turn. What's more is she can place debuffs on weak hits. That is amazing because of that A2, right? So really special champion in my opinion. I'm talking her up, but for good reason. She's just so incredibly good. And next up, guys, a lot of people sleep on this guy as another block buffs option in the epic category. It's Phoenix or Phenax, an AoE block buffs for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. So very hard-hitting A1. He also brings decreased defense and decreased speed. Granted on a 4-turn cooldown single target, but at least you have him there to help out as well, and a lot of damage out of his A1 and his A3, especially his A1. So those are all my favorite block buffs champions in the game. Now let's talk about some debuffers. So having a debuffer on your team is going to be important as well, right? I only have 4 selected here. These are my faves, right? So let's start out with the one that you saw, the obvious Venus. She's so incredibly good, decreased defense and weaken with HP burn. And if you have her on the same team as Cupidus, you're lucky enough to have both these champions. She can also remove buffs from all enemies. So she's serving a lot of utility, damage dealer, AoE attacker, and debuffer. And if you're lucky enough to have both those champions, the pure partner ability as well, all with great base stats. Just one of the best debuffers in the game for Hydra Clan Boss. Next up, we have, speaking of best debuffers in the game for Hydra Clan Boss, we talked about Ugo, so I'm not going to include her here, but obviously Ugo is going to be front and center, right? But next up we have Lydia, of course. So if you're lucky enough to have Lydia, if you completed all of your faction crypts, guys, I mean, this ability is insane. Decrease defense, weaken, strengthen, and increase speed. All the big versions on a 3-turn cooldown. Yeah, that's really good. Let's talk about some epic options, guys, here. Again, this is not the most thorough. Not every debuffer in the game is going to be named. These are just my personal favorites, and we should go to Deke, right? So Deke is fantastic. He has a fill turn meter of all allies by 15%, grants an extra turn. Come in here and basically keep decreased defense up all the time on the Hydra heads, or at least almost all the time, because of the turn or cooldown reduction generated by the A3 as it applies to the A2 ability. Also, you can use him as your speed or lead. Speed in all battles by 19%. And then another one of my faves here, guys, is none other than Stag Knight, right? How can I forget Stag Knight? He has a decreased speed on his A1, and he has an AoE decreased defense and decreased attack on his A2. So obviously having debuffer is going to be very important as well. Those are some of my favorites. Who do you run? Who do you use? Let me know. When we talk about Hex champions, right? Hex is interesting. As we talked about with Head of Mischief, if we can keep Hex up more often than not, it's really going to mitigate, or at least be able to help destroy and decapacitate, what?
Are you sure about that?
Decapitate that Hydra head, you know what I'm saying?
No, not really.
It's really Mithrala Lifebane, right? That is the best Hexer in the game. She also brings Strengthen and Shield and increased defense and increased attack in Hex for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Another option, guys, we have Rule, the Hunt Master. I mean, he's okay, but I don't love him for Hydra Clan Boss. He does have Hex, though, in his kit on a 4-turn cooldown, but I just don't think his damage justifies using a whole spot just to have that Hex there. Another one that I will shout out on Hex champions, guys, is Thailessia. Her defense isn't bad, but her HP is so low. It's tough, and this is a very important point here. After we talk about her, she has an AoE on the A2, AoE on the A3, with decreased defense. On the passive, when attacking enemies under decreased defense, 50% chance of placing a Hex debuff on them for 2 turns, makes her, along with Mithrala, one of the best dependable Hex layers in the game because of that passive. A lot of people don't remember that passive because Hex really wasn't too enticing when she was introduced to the game. This is very important here, guys. Before we get to the decreased speed champions, I cannot stress this enough. When you're building any champion for Hydra Clan Boss, any champion out there, guys, you really want to consider very heavily building them tanky enough to stay alive, meaning we want to invest in HP or defense, primarily HP, on our accessories. So I don't know exactly what I have on Mashald. Basically, don't follow anything that I'm saying right now on Mashald, right? Let me just go to a champion who I know I use all the time. Let's just go to Ugo, right? So Mashald is different. I have him fully empowered. He's one of my best champions on my entire account. So he's naturally pretty tanky compared to the rest of my champions anyway. But a champion like, it doesn't even matter, Geomancer, obviously, right? We want him to have...
This right here is my sway.
And of course, he has attack, right? Of course he has attack. We want him to have HP. We want to get HP on our accessories here, guys. It's always the way, right? We pick champions that... He did have a trip roll of defense there, though, so that's probably why I went with that ring. But we want to have survivability is my main point, right? Defense, HP, accuracy. We really want to get that accuracy off. Try to get an HP there instead and make up the accuracy, but we do have her in Relentless gear. But, you know, I say all that, guys, going, especially on your accessories, on your squishier champions, that's a great way to get hit points, get HP on your ring, get HP on your banner, and if you're not expecting a lot of damage out of that champion, even go HP on your amulet as well. Building your champions, even with the HP percentage on their chest, is going to be very, very helpful. You can see I have that on Ugo right here, because again, guys, it's really about surviving the long haul here, right? Getting just one little burst of damage, then half your team is wiped. It's not going to be enough. All right, so let's go to decreased speed. I love decreased speed champions, right? You guys know that Mother Cybele is one of my favorite champions inside the entire game. She really is. She's very fast, 115 base speed. She's pretty tanky, right? A lot of defense, decent amount of HP. She's an AoE with decreased speed, with turn meter fill on herself. On her A1 ability, I forgot how much damage she dealt on that team that I showed you guys earlier, but I want to say it was around 6 million or so. She deals, that damage adds up. All you have to do is have 100% crit rate and don't even worry about crit damage. You know, it will just add up, right? Especially with the Hex. I run her sometimes, not this rotation, but sometimes on the team with Mithrala. Now, extra Hex damage, it's not a ton, but on a longer Hydra Clan Boss battle, that really does add up, especially if you have a bunch of AoE attackers, right? All that ancillary 10% damage on all those Hex Hydra heads is really going to add up at the end of the day. So Mother Cybele is definitely, that is the case with her, with a lot of damage out of her A1, but most importantly, decreased speed on an AoE on the A1 at a 50% land rate when booked is enough to basically keep this up all the time. She also has increased defense, revive on death, and speed in all battles by 24% on top of being incredibly fast herself. I love this champion, but there's a couple more that I want to point out for you guys. One is going to be another champion that all of you guys are going to eventually have access to, and that is Vizix the Unbowed. She has an AoE decreased speed as well, and again, guys, 30% decreased speed, it's an underrated debuff. I mean, some of you guys might rate it properly because you're smart. My viewers are smart, of course, right? You guys?
Where did that come from?
But a lot of players out there, they just do not. They underestimate vastly the power of decreased speed. Very, very important overall, especially in longer fights. She's also bringing Ally Protect. She's also bringing Provoke and a shield to the table. Just be careful, she can take a lot of damage. And the last one that I will point out to you guys is actually none other than Tanix. So Tanix Hateflower is another daily login reward champion who is underrated. She's a healer A1. On the A2, though, an AoE decreased speed. Attacks one enemy, well, it's not an AoE attack, but attacks one enemy, then has a make it 100% chance, excuse me, when booked, of placing decreased speed on the target for 2 turns, has a 100% chance of placing decreased speed on all enemies for 2 turns, instead if the attack is critical. So a good option for you guys. Heck, I'll give you one more. There's actually not that many good AoE 3-turn cooldown decreased speed champions in the game, but another one in terms of a damage dealer who also brings it to the table is Tuak the Wanderer. He has an AoE with 100% decreased speed for 2 turns. He also has increased speed on himself and a heal. No big deal. So really good ability here on a 3-turn cooldown in Whirl of Battle. So those are my favorite decreased speed champions, guys. But basically, having a decreased speed, in my opinion, is something that I try to get on every team if I can. Again, there's not a ton of great options there. That's kind of one of those nice to have, but not mandatory. But I absolutely look for that on all of my teams. Next up is just AoE attackers, right? Nukers. AoE is king in Hydra Clan Boss and Raid Shadow Legends. So having 1 or 2 or more AoE nukers, AoE on the A1 is something I definitely look for as well. I'm going to point out a few of my favorites. I think that running Senesha and Skullcrown together is a really, really formidable combination, guys. An AoE on the A1, and then we get great heals from Senesha. And then Skullcrown, we get kind of the opposite, and their companion champion, so they have the automatic revivals and stuff when Senesha's on the same team. But again, an AoE on the A1, an AoE on the A2 with Skullcrown as well. I mean, both of these sisters can really dish out damage and heal a lot, especially when you have them together. So those are great epic options for you guys for AoE attackers. Now let's get into some of the best damage dealers in the entire game. Most of these are going to be AoE, but not all. So obviously, Trunda is amazing. Her A2 especially smacks serious damage. But you guys, if you have Trunda, you probably already know that. Same thing with her A3. Her A3 is amazing. I build her with low accuracy, especially in the arena, and this would be her most powerful ability. But for Hydra, it's really about that A2 ability. Next up, we're going to go ahead and go with, we don't like to talk about Ninja too much on the channel here, but, with that Hail Burn ability, it's just incredible. It deals so much damage, and HP burn, way more than poison, is king, right? HP burn against the regular Demon Lord Clan Boss, not so much. HP burn against Hydra Clan Boss, especially with instant activations, yes please. So champions like champions like Ninja, like Sissia Flametongue, are going to be absolutely amazing for you guys. So Ninja, great option for you guys, obviously. Next up, let's talk about the enemy max HP champions, and Husk, AoE, enemy max HP on Despair on a 4-turn cooldown. And of course, you guys are familiar, you might have heard of him, High Elf Royal Guard with a takedown ability and AoE, damage increase according to enemy max HP, and this deals a little bit more damage than Husk's A2 ability, but it's nice to have a force and a magic affinity, and since you need 3 teams, I'm sure you can benefit from both of those champions. Next up, we already talked about Cupidus a little bit, and AoE on the A1. I won't go over him again. Let's talk about we have to show Sissia, though, because she's one of the best damage dealers overall in all of Hydra Clan Boss. She has an AoE on the A3, and then she grants an extra turn if the HP burn debuff is placed on all enemies. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, but either way, on her A2, she has a weaken, first of all, which is a big version of weaken, just starting things out here, right? After that, she has decreased defense for 2 turns if there are at least 2 enemies under HP burn debuffs. So, I mean, then instantly activates those HP burns on each target, right? So that's what everybody knows her for. But she can also bring weaken and decrease defense on free turn cooldown, the same ability. So not only is she an amazing debuffer, she's an amazing damage dealer, or an amazing damage dealer and an amazing debuffer. You guys get the point. She's amazing. There's so many great AoE nukers, guys. I should talk about some of the most powerful, in my opinion, again here before we move on. Thailessia is fantastic. She also has an AoE HP burn for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. She also has decreased speed on targets with less than 50% turn meter. So this is a great ability for control and for burn. And then she has Burning Regret, which deals a ton of damage to a single target. If you hit a
Just close your eyes.
decapitated head with this A3, you're talking about, you know, 400,000 to 1 million damage based on how you build her. A lot of extra damage there. So there's a lot of great AoE nukers, AoE damage dealers in the game, guys. I could sit here the entire video and talk about them all, but I will cap it there. But again, AoE champions are great. They're going to be great. You know what? I lied. Let me cover a couple more here. Suzerain Catone, AoE on the A1 with decreased speed. We talked about this, right? Another 50% AoE decreased speed champion for you guys. And an AoE on the A2 with weaken and decreased defense if weaken is not placed. And on the A3, what is it? Another AoE attack. So this is another champion you guys can look at for an AoE option. There's a lot of them. The Scartorsis is another one, so I could keep going on and on. Next up is going to be Revivers, right? So having a Reviver is going to be almost quintessential for success in Hydra Clan Boss. However, on one of my teams, you'll notice I don't have a Reviver. I have Mother Cybele with Revive on Death, and that is my failsafe. If you're going to run a team like that, you better be bringing Strengthen, increased defense, maybe some shield, some cleanses, a lot of support, maybe Norak and Lydia on the same team with those passives, right? You really need, or Guardian gear, right? You're gonna need a lot of damage mitigation if you don't have a Reviver. So run a Reviver on your team, right? Let me talk about some of my favorites. We have Ursula the Mourner. She's a great AoE revive. She also brings increased defense and strength in big versions on a 5-turn cooldown. She also brings increased attack and decreased attack. She's great. Arbiter, man, she hasn't seen this much action since the arena as she has in Hydra Clan Boss. A great champion, guys. Has turn meter fill, revival on the A4, on the A3, increase attack, turn meter fill, and a heal. We forget about that heal sometimes because we rarely use it in the actual arena on the first turn. Usually she's going to go first teams, but that helps you out a lot, right, against Hydra Clan Boss. Then she has an AoE, decrease the duration of all buffs on enemies by 1 turn. This is really handy as well. You just had to build her with some accuracy. And then she has weaken on her A1. So a really, really good option is Arbiter if you rebuild her from your arena comp, or if you're able to kind of land that perfect hybrid build on your Arbiter. Next up is going to be one of my personal faves. It's Rector Droth. Great healer, great healer. Also brings perfect Veil to the table, which is, you know, great for damage mitigation. And we have the Revival as well. So just a really, really good champion, good base stats as well. Let's talk about Godseeker Aniri, guys. Godseeker, definitely 1A and 1B. I guess those 3, Godseeker, Ursula, and Rector, are just, to me, the class acts of Revivers among all epics, but really among all champions out there. She has the failsafe revive on her passive, Guardian Angel. If an ally is about to get killed, preempts that hit, revive on death. And then she has another revive, resets this cooldown of all of their skills on a 4-turn cooldown in Rise of Glory. What's more is an AoE attack. We talked earlier, guys, about how important it is to have these abilities, these masteries that will help us in these longer battles, right? With Godseeker Aniri, another thing to point out here is any champion that has increased the duration of all buffs on all, buffs on all allies, and decrease on enemies is going to also be incredibly important, incredibly beneficial. It's not a must-have, but it's a super, super nice to have on any team. So be on the lookout for those abilities. Extending durations on long battles is going to be really, really profound in terms of its overall impact on your team. Mordecai's a great HP burner as well, just while we're talking about it. We talked about, oh my god, how can I not talk about... Did I talk about Geomancer enough yet, guys? We got to give Geo a little bit of love, right? Going back to damage dealers really quickly here, guys. We mentioned it earlier, but in AoE on the A1, we have the HP burn, the weaken, and then the synergy with the passive, right? Decrease the damage receive, and that gets reflected back into those enemies with HP burn. Just absolutely tremendous. All right, back to revivers here. Sorry about that, guys. I want to call out a couple more. Obviously, my favorite reviver in the game is going to be Duchess, primarily because she has this great ethereal ways, passive damage mitigation, and then she brings block debuffs, increased attack, and perfect veil to the table, along with this nasty, nasty revival on a 4-turn cooldown. And then the last one that I will shout out here, guys, is going to be a dark elf, and it's Ryan the Conjurer. She's from Doom Tower, normal secret rooms, and she's great too because she has a very unique reviving kit compared to everybody else that we spotlight so far. And that is, she has a single target revive. It's okay. But she has an AoE weaken with remove all buffs from all enemies. So this is a buff stripper on a 3-turn cooldown that you can have on your team and also kind of check off that reviver category too. We just talked about this earlier. We love champions that can do two things, multiple things in the same battle. Healing in this game, in Hydra Clan Boss, super important, right? So I'm gonna go over some of my favorite healers really quickly. Vogoth, great, right? He also is a good provoker, right? And he has a triple increasing duration of random, okay, all right, on the A1. So provoke, solid, right? But more importantly, these heals on these or the leech on this one, and the heals, 50% of the damage received every single time he's attacked. With that provoke in there too is helpful. Just a really, really good, one of the best healers in the game. Speaking of best healers in the game, guys, here's a champion that's super underrated just as a sheer healer. Operdin Clanfather. This guy really does a lot of healing if you're looking for a healer that a lot of people might have, because he was, I believe he was a, what was he, fragment summon at some point, but he can deal a lot of healing, guys. So if you're just looking for someone to keep your team alive, if you notice they're always low on HP, go ahead and try it, right? Next up, Rio Bone Spear. She's got a great heal on this A3, removes a cleanse on a 3-turn cooldown, plays a block buff, debuffs for 2 turns, and then heals by 35% of their max HP, a further 5% for each debuff removed from them. So if you're removing 3 debuffs, get a 50% heal on this 3-turn cooldown. Very, very good healer. Let's talk about some more accessible ones. Obviously, guys, a champion like good old Vrask. He's an orc, not a barbarian, Ash. It's been a while since I've tried out good old Vrask, but Vrask is a really, really solid healer, guys. On this passive, heals all allies by 10% of this champion's max HP whenever this champion inflicts a critical hit. That's amazing. It's amazing, right? So just build him with 100% crit rate and a ton of HP, and he can be a healer for your team. Next up is going to be, we talked about Retro Draft. Great healer as well, right? Great healer and reviver. 2 birds, 1 stone. Skytouch Shaman, believe it or not, guys, especially if you have a block debuffs champion on your team, you can mitigate or get around the decreased speed and the fear chance. Obviously, Inquisitor Shamil, we're going to talk about in just a moment as well, will help you there. The thing is she's a great healer. And she's also bringing block debuffs and revive on death to the table with a cleanse on a 4-turn cooldown. And then this A1 and this passive just makes her a great healer. You guys can try out for yourselves as well, even in Hydra Clan Boss. Next up is going to be one of my recent favorites, guys. I had a whole video, long build on Bivald of the Thorn. Really good champion for Hydra. An AoE provoke with a leech, right? Strengthen on himself. That's great. They can land on weak hits as well. Sign me up. On the A3, on a 4-turn cooldown, we have an AoE, heals all allies 20% of the damage inflicted and places a shield on them as well. So a great all-around support champion, and can also dish out some damage with 2 strong AoE attacks in his kit as well. We have, oh, we were right there. Bishop Pintroy, we already talked about him, but this heal here, really, really nasty as well. Really good support champion who I'm a big fan of in the game. So those are some of my favorite healers. Of course, we haven't talked about really any rare champions, so I apologize for that, guys. But, you know, you can always get by with champions like Apothecary with a great heal that can be critical on a 2-turn cooldown. So filling in with champions like Apothecary is absolutely great. We have increased speed and turn meter fill as well. We talked about the importance already of increased speed in Hydra Clan Boss battles. So those are some of my favorite healers. We ought to quickly talk about Inquisitor Shamil. You guys probably already know but he's one of the best champions, one of the most quintessential champions to build multiple of even for Hydra Clan Boss, guys. Relying on this A3 to cleanse fears and true fears, and then increase the allies' turn meter by 15% on top of that. Also counterattacking anytime someone lands a debuff on an ally with his A1. I run him in a toxic set. On one of my builds, I have a multiple Inquisitor Shamils built, and it works out great. Provokers, really quickly here, guys. We already talked all about Contra and how that passive can be a great provoke option for you all, so don't sleep on her. We have champions like Angar is a great provoker. He's just really solid, right? Provoke on the A1 and provoke on the A2 can basically keep it up all the time. By that same kind of, there's so many good provokers, so many really high provokes on A1s. Even like a champion like Husk has a provoke on his A1 as well. But where am I going? War Chief, obviously known for being the quintessential provoker inside the game. Provoke on the A1 and the A2. A champion who I'm actually, I don't know, some people hate this guy, some people love him, but Black Knight. Black Knight has a 75% chance provoke on his A1. And he has continuous heal, increased defense. Not a bad option for you guys to consider if you're lucky enough to have him, or unlucky enough, I guess. I don't know. Some people, I don't know why he gets so much hate, man. Give me Black Knight any day over a champion like Angar, you know, personally. A couple other champions to talk about here, guys. We're not going to let you go without talking about Krisk, don't worry. But really quick before that, we even have Seeker. On Seeker's A1, he has a 50% chance provoke. Attack one enemy two times, 50% provoke on the A1, also brings turn meter boost, increased attack, extra turn, more provokes, right? So Seeker's a great option for you guys as well. And Krisk is really just one of the best overall champions inside the game, you know, just bar none, right? But especially when it comes to Hydra Clan Boss as well. He's an AoE decreased speed on his A1. We already talked a lot about how important that is. We have an AoE with Ally Protect and continuous heal on himself, and increase the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. Man, like, everything we're talking about that we want from a champion. And then we have Provoke on the A3, increased defense on himself, increased speed on all allies. He also has landing decreased defense and decreased attack on his passive every time he is attacked. So this guy is a difference maker. Just be careful that your buffs aren't stolen when you're running a champion like Krisk or Martyr or Valkyrie on your team. I didn't talk about, there's so many champions we didn't talk about, guys, but those are some of my favorites in the game, right? Like decrease attack, provoke on this ability as well on a 4-turn cooldown, counterattack, increased defense, great option, but again, be careful on champions like that. So guys, those are a bunch of champions, kind of how I like to assemble a team. Again, provoke, heals, reviver, AoE attacks, decrease speed, hex, debuffer, and block buffs. Start with block buffs. Guys, I hope you found this video interesting, entertaining, maybe a little bit of both. Hopefully it's motivated you to make a really good Hydra Clan Boss team. And let me know, guys, be sure in the comments. I imagine most of you agree with me, but let me know. How do you feel about the overall, you know, difficulty and the rewards on Hydra Clan Boss? Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy the content here, please subscribe to the channel. I invite you to subscribe. Thank you so much, guys. Have a lovely day or evening. And as always, take care, guys.